Huddle up. It's me, Angel Reese. You can't beat the post-game burger and fries, right? Know what else you can't beat? The Angel Reese Special. Let's break it down. My favorite barbecue sauce, American cheese, crispy bacon, pickles, onions, and a sesame seed bun, of course. And don't forget the fries and a drink. It's gonna be a high C for me. Sound good? All you have to do to get it is beat me in a one-on-one. I'm just playing. Get the Angel Reese Special at McDonald's now. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating restaurants for a limited time.
Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Washington Wise is an original podcast from Charles Schwab that unpacks the stories making news in Washington right now and how they may affect your finances and portfolio. Listen at schwab.com/WashingtonWise. I've been on this quest to find new analogies to describe what's happening with Donald Trump and the federal government right now. And that's how, last week, I found myself on the line with Gábor Scheiring. Gábor, how often are you back in Hungary these days?
I try to go there at least once or twice a year. So last I was there was for the end of the year, around Christmas in December.
Gábor is a professor now, but a decade back, he was a member of parliament. He was just 29 years old, representing Budapest as Prime Minister Viktor Orbán came to power. Gábor had a front row seat as Orbán remade his country, which is part of why he doesn't live there anymore. When I asked him what it feels like to return to Hungary these days, he sighed.
Overall, my generic personal impression is rather bleak. The way the country has been completely changed by Viktor Orbán, it has become a more frustrated country, a darker place in many ways. People's relationships with each other, I think, are more hostile.
You've probably heard Viktor Orbán's name in the last few months. For a lot of conservatives, Orbán's Hungary serves as a model. When Prime Minister Orbán visited Washington last year, he avoided Joe Biden, but showed up at Mar-a-Lago and the Heritage Foundation. And at his presidential debate with Kamala Harris, Donald Trump seemed proud of this endorsement.
Let me just tell you about world leaders. Viktor Orbán, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president.
Now that Trump is back in office, Gábor says his first few weeks in the White House look eerily like what he saw go down in Hungary. Orbán had his own shock and awe strategy. Like Trump, he targeted civil servants and the press.
I think there are so many similarities. And I think if there is one lesson emerging from Hungary is that, it's at the end of the day, it's not institutions, it's not elites that are going to defend democracy. It's the people who have to defend democracy. And they are not going to defend democracy if they don't think that democracy has something to offer to them.
It's interesting to talk to you because I'm not quite sure, given what you're saying, whether you, as a former Hungarian politician, want to offer Americans a warning right now or comfort.
I certainly would like to offer comfort in a sense that there is hope that this can be stopped. But I also do think that this shock should lead to a really deep rethinking of what progressive politics needs to be. So I think the US is in a new era, and it hasn't really started now. I think it has already started in 2016. And I look at the 4 years with Biden in the White House more of a kind of a last attempt of an increasingly outdated model of politics to stay relevant. But it was, I think, doomed to fail.
Today on the show, lessons from Hungary for this critical moment. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This episode is brought to you by Discover. Have you heard about doublenomics? It's okay if you haven't. It is extremely niche and practiced by Discover. Here's an example of doublenomics. Discover automatically doubles the cash back earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back into $300. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
It's easy to think of Hungary as a place that's pretty different from the U.S. It's a former Soviet bloc country. It's about the size of Indiana. But Gábor Scheiring says if you rewind the clock to before Viktor Orbán came to power, you can see the seeds of the same kind of discontent we're dealing with here now.
So I grew up in the 80s and 90s in a working class family on the outskirts of Budapest. And my family kind of paid a heavy price for the economic shocks that the country witnessed at that point, not necessarily just financially, but also in terms of health. So both of my parents suffered from the physical effects of the stress that came with the threat of unemployment and increasing difficulties of securing financial means to kind of basically survive. This was quite unfortunately a common experience in many countries in Eastern Europe. People with lower levels of education, you might want to call them working class people, working class families, had a really hard time adjusting to the emerging new market economy. So, for example, in the case of Hungary, when Viktor Orbán took power, the average real wage was just around 10% higher than it was around the end of the 70s, early 80s. So that's basically nothing. And at the same time, inequality skyrocketed. 60% of society that was just falling behind.
Were people angry?
People were very angry in the 90s. Yet they were also hopeful that over a longer time period, things would get better. They also trusted liberal elites that they would listen to their suffering and provide solutions. And this clearly turned out to be untrue. And this is not because of the socialist past. If you look at the same story of globalization and international economic integration and trade liberalization in the United States, the industrialized states and heartland of the US, and how it affected the working class, how it led to a massive mortality crisis among less educated Americans, you see many, many parallels. So if you look at the stagnation of real wages in Eastern Europe, the stagnation of real wages in the United States, or if you look at the stagnation of real wages of Germans without a university degree, you see the same processes that lower middle class Germans, Hungarians, Americans couldn't really benefit from this kind of globalization process that really only benefited the wealthiest elites, corporations, and the lucky ones with really good education.
So what exactly set the stage for Viktor Orbán and his political party Fidesz to come to power?
So these processes of dislocation led to massive disillusionment among large swaths of Hungarian society. And then you end up with the 2008 financial crisis, which just made everything even worse. the Socialist Party and the liberal elites continue to doubling down and really, frankly, being not able to listen to the suffering of these lower middle class and working class citizens.
I find it so interesting that, like Donald Trump, Viktor Orbán came to power. He then lost power. And then all of a sudden, after the 2008 financial crash, he came back to power. It's such an interesting parallel to me that happened.
Yeah, that's crucial because both of these people have learned a lot and they drew conclusions from their first stint in power. And the conclusions that they drew was that they need to be much more aggressive in centralizing whatever power they can centralize. And they came back to power with a very clear blueprint of how to do that.
Yeah. You became a member of parliament the same year that Viktor Orbán returned to office. How quickly did Viktor Orbán start to consolidate his grip on power? And how did he do it?
It started very, very rapidly, and it felt completely overwhelming from day one.
As soon as Orbán was reelected in 2010, he started dismantling Hungary's democratic safeguards one by one. His party, Fidesz, passed a new constitution. They forced hundreds of judges to retire, and they redrew electoral districts and altered voting laws to help ensure that Fidesz and Orbán would have political dominance.
And I remember having to stay in the parliament building until late, early in the morning, very often. Orbán grabbed power by kind of sidelining the administration and preparing laws and decrees. And it took him a few years to kind of fire all the civil servants that he disliked, to capture the constitutional court, to restructure the media landscape with the help of some friendly oligarchs who bought up the majority of newspapers and television scene in the country.
It seems nonsensical that someone like Viktor Orbán would form this alliance between rich people, billionaires, the working class, and his political party, because you would think that the working class would be angry at the rich people, but actually it makes complete sense with characters like Trump and Orbán. Can you explain why?
It makes sense, but it depends also on the lack of progressive alternatives. So this is when this strategy works. If you have a working class that comes to the conclusion that nationalism, radical forms of nationalism, is their best hope, then they start to think that their national business elites might be better than those nasty foreign business elites.
It relies on so much cynicism.
It's certainly a cynical strategy, because if you look at how these people govern, typically deregulate businesses, reduce taxes for the wealthiest citizens and corporations. The same happened in Hungary. One of the very first measures of Viktor Orbán was to reduce top income taxes and increase actually income taxes for low-income Hungarians.
This all sounds so familiar.
Yeah, exactly. And then he also invited basically half of the country's economic elite to kind of co-govern. He created all these shadow positions in his government.
Sounds like Elon Musk.
Exactly.
I'm curious how you as a politician responded to Orbán's ascendance, because right now I think there's a lot of talk of sort of what are the Democrats doing? Should they be doing more? What is it they should be doing? How did your political reaction compare to what you see in D.C.? Like, I was reading, you would propose alternative budgets when Orbán was in power and you were a member of parliament, and then eventually, he never paid attention to them. So you hired a bulldozer to deliver your budget proposal at one point. You protested, chained yourself to fences. Tell me more.
Yeah, so initially these were kind of desperate attempts to grab people's attention and show them what's going on and how Orbán is consolidating power.
You wanted to project emergency.
Exactly, that's a very good way to frame this. When they rewrote the constitution, and parallel to that, they rewrote the electoral law, it was a crucial moment because after that, if you were honest, you couldn't say anymore that Hungary is really a democracy.
I'm struck by the fact that all the things you did, all the sort of showy, protesty things, would you characterize them as working? Do you think they worked?
Ultimately, I think the honest answer is that we failed. We failed because we failed at creating a democratic majority.
What would you have done differently? Do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think I was part of the opposition that always tried to push the message that you need an inclusive social and economic policy agenda that clearly listens to the suffering of Hungarians that led them to vote to Viktor Orbán, and you need to provide solutions that radically go beyond the kind of centrist liberalism that characterized the opposition before. But I don't think we managed to push that message enough. And at crucial, critical moments, the opposition tended to concentrate too much on institutional issues. And frankly, unfortunately, the number of people who get up early in the morning and say that the restructuring of the Constitutional Court is the worst thing that happened to me, the number of those people is sadly low. So I'm not saying that it's not super crucial to defend those institutions, but you defend democracy by talking about those bread and butter issues, the economic insecurities that really concern them.
After the break, is the U.S. destined to follow in Hungary's footsteps? This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. This process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Every day, thousands of Comcast engineers and technologists, like Kunle, put people at the heart of everything they create.
In the average household, there are dozens of connected devices. Here in the Comcast family, we're building an integrated in-home Wi-Fi solution for millions of families like my own. It brings people together in meaningful ways.
Kunle and his team are building a Wi-Fi experience that connects 1 billion devices every year. Learn more about how Comcast is redefining the future of connectivity at comcastcorporation.com/Wi-Fi.
Build a routine with Ollie that supports your wellness needs, like getting your daily vitamins and minerals with Ollie's multi-gummies, or keeping your mood upbeat with all the vitamin D in Hello Happy. Give your gut health some support with probiotics, and wake up feeling refreshed after taking Ollie Sleep. Do wellness on your terms. Find Ollie at a Walmart or Target near you, or at ollie.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
I want to lay out to people how it felt in Hungary. Like, was there a moment in Hungary when you knew, like, oh, things have flipped here? This is not a functioning democracy anymore. What I'm struggling with is I think a lot of Americans right now don't see a problem with a dictator. You know?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, certainly, the way you feel as an opposition MP is not the same you feel as a voter who supported Viktor Orbán again and giving him a constitutional majority. So that's why I think the failures of of the country's liberal politics is a crucial lesson for others who want to defend democracy. We were extremely worried about what's going on with the Constitutional Court, but haven't really paid attention to talking about issues that people were more worried about. Again, I don't want to downplay the importance of the Constitutional Court, but that's not how you defend democracy. You defend democracy by defending people against the power grab of Hungary political and economic elites.
But I guess, how do you convince people that they need to be defended against the power grab if they're voting for the power grab?
I think in many ways you don't really need to convince them, not even in the US, because you just need to listen to them. They are crying out for help loud. I mean, if you just look at the massive mortality crisis in America's Rust Belt, the extreme support throughout the US for increasing the minimum wage, even in red states from Florida to Missouri, people's desire to rein in corporate oligarchic elites, to reduce inequality. These things are already there. The problem is there wasn't really a progressive offer on the table that was convincing enough.
Yeah. How are things in Hungary now? Is Orbán's grip on power still strong?
Institutionally, his grip on power is as strong as ever before, if not even stronger. And the election of Trump has certainly helped him to gain significant amount of symbolic capital. Yet, the kind of the economic impetus that allowed Orbán to stay popular, even though he was redistributing a lot of money upwards towards business elites and upper income Hungarians, he could get away with that because the economy was growing quite rapidly until the COVID crisis, basically. This ended up in a very significant financial difficulties for Orbán, very bad economic performance in the last couple of years, significant real wage crisis from inflation, and this led to the rise of a new opposition party, which seems quite competitive at the moment. There's still a year to go, or more than a year to go, until the next national elections, and I think Orbán has quite a few tricks up his sleeve, so to speak, and he can always change the electoral law. He can always use the prosecutor's office to go after the leader of the opposition, and I think that's certainly that's something that they will going to do. But there's also more hope in the air on the streets of Budapest than there was a couple of years ago.
If an opposition party did take control in Hungary, how hard would it be to undo all of the various mechanisms Viktor Orbán has put into place? And wouldn't it be tempting to use those mechanisms to punish Orbán's government in some way?
I think that's a very difficult question, and that's a question that no one really has good answers to. Orbán has planted all these landmines that is going to be extremely challenging to govern should the opposition win.
Give me an example of one.
He has stuffed all the institutions with loyalists. He has an extremely vast network of right-wing media system, again, partially run by these loyal oligarchs. There's a new constitution that was unilaterally passed by Viktor Orbán and his party. Changing that again would require a 2/3 majority. And that constitution is full with his alt-right conservative institutional cultural ideas.
I'm exhausted just thinking about it. If there's one thing you'd tell my listeners in the United States to do right now, what is it?
Don't despair. Organize, but organize strategically with an eye to organizing majority, which needs a new kind of symbolic politics and needs a new kind of social and economic, a new deal for lower class Americans. So that's the kind of organizing that needs to be done in the US.
Gábor, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Gábor Scheiring is a former member of the Hungarian parliament and an assistant professor of comparative politics at Georgetown University, Qatar. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, Madeline Ducharme, and Ethan Oberman. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate, and I'm Mary Harris. You can go track me down on Blue Sky if you'd like. I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you back here next time.